Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome home again to the neighborhood of Ion, right outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Today's our second visit here. The first floor deck is almost completed. We're still putting down some plywood. We're also going to be putting up some of the perimeter walls and the first floor partitions. And we've got a visit from Brian Redling, who's with the APA. He's going to be demonstrating some of the new technology that fights hurricane damage from high winds. Stick around. It's good to have you home again. The homes being built here in the new neighborhood of Ion are inspired by the traditional towns of the 19th century. The traditional designs are combined with modern technology. These plans for the house we're building include this large columned porch on two sides of the house. If you remember, last week we got the foundation finished. We used engineered wood for the girt and I-joists. Now let's get together with Bob Ryley and our general contractor Kevin Kalman and get to work on the first floor deck. Okay, well, Ryley is putting down adhesive on the tops of the I-joists. What we're working on right now is what we call the decking. And that doesn't really refer to building an outside deck. It refers to putting subflooring down over the joists. The subflooring, of course, will receive either carpeting or vinyl floors or hardwood floors. And you can see that this is a tongued and grooved plywood. It's southern yellow pine, and it's really taken over the industry because it used to be 20 years ago we used CDX fir plywood, and it delaminated a little bit. This is still in the mid-$20 range per sheet, and it still does a very good job. It holds the water. Yeah. Why is it so important, Ryley, to put down the panel adhesive uniformly before you put down a sheet of plywood?
Well, it really is going to adhere the plywood to the joist, and it's going to take all that bounce out of it, stiffen up the floor,
right,
eliminate any squeaks that you might have in there.
Right.
But you want to nail it off right away because this stuff sets up fast.
Yeah, and what happens is when you put down the sheet of plywood and it goes on top of the adhesive, you're kind of squishing the adhesive and almost creating a gasketing effect on the whole thing. Let me get down here. How's that?
Good. One more up over here, Bob.
Keep coming.
Good. Good.
All right. And then Kevin just nails it off. And what kind of nails are you using?
We're using ring shank 8D nails.
Now, are those the nails that have adhesive on them?
No, these are pass load nails. They are a gun nail. They're an 8-penny.
Uh-huh.
We're going to nail this off on every joist. We'll get a nail, and then we're going to nail it off a minimum of 12 inches on center. Mm-hmm. We tend to over nail. We go for 6 to 8 inches on center.
Right. But that's eliminating the possibility of squeaks, which I'm told is like the #1 callback for in a contractor's life.
Squeaks, leaks, and drywall pops are the nightmare.
Squeaks, leaks, and pops, right.
They're a nightmare.
Set.
Okay, well, anytime that we are laying out the plywood deck, is that where you want it, Kevin?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You'll have some overhanging plywood like you have here. Now, Kevin, when you're laying out and putting the plywood down, sometimes it makes sense to overhang, you know, whatever it is, for reasons of layout. Can you explain that?
We want to stagger the joints of our plywood, Bob, 4 foot on center. So when we lay a full 8-foot sheet, the next sheet that comes on, we're going to lay that at 4 feet from where the first sheet started. In a situation like this, by starting out with a 4-foot piece here, our 8-foot piece actually hung over the end of the deck. Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier to strike a line, go around the perimeter of the building, and just saw off the excess piece than to call those measurements out to the cut guy in the field.
Exactly, and that's where you get a little waste, but it makes the job go more quickly. And then we've got another one to cut over here. And we call it a little waste, but somebody will make a doghouse out of it. So at this point, we really have almost 2/3 of the decking complete.
When we come back, we'll be raising the first floor walls. Stick around.
Okay, well, the first of the outside walls is getting ready to go up, and the one thing you want to notice right away is we're using 2x6 studs for the exterior walls, which will give us the opportunity to put in fiberglass for an R30 factor. It's not that big a deal in southern hot climates, but it's a real payback where you have real cold weather and you want to keep the cold weather out. Also, it's an advantage from the point of view of finishing off inside the house. When you put the windows in a 2x6 outside wall, you got that extra depth for blinds or whatever. Now, Riley, let's talk about the layout, because what we've got here are the pressure-treated shoe and top plate, which are always put together at the assembly stage so that when you do the layout, you can do the layout of your locations on both at the same time.
At the same time, exactly. But before you start laying it out, the first thing they're going to do is cut these plates to length, so that on this last stud here, they're going to end up on a 16-inch center.
Exactly.
So that you split the stud just
so
like
that
these
you
guys
don't
got
have
it.
the top and bottom plates kind of wobbling in there, not fastened to a vertical member.
Right, and to help us along, this tape has got every 16, wherever the 16 inches is colored in red.
Right.
So it stands out for you.
Exactly. Now let's meet Brian Redling from APA, the Engineered Wood Association. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Bob.
How are you?
Good.
Now, one of the objectives in building this dream house is to make it as strong as it possibly can be to withstand hurricanes, earthquakes, and the like. And let's talk a little bit about some of the materials that we're using here.
Well, this is a laminated veneer lumber header that we're using. It's superior to a dimension lumber header. It's made similar to plywood in that the veneer is peeled and used to produce the beam, but in this case the veneer is not cross-oriented as you have with plywood.
It's all going in the same direction.
Right, so
And
all the veneer is working for you.
And I don't know if you can see it well in an extreme close-up here, but there must be 20 layers of it there.
Right.
So that is what makes this a lot stronger than a regular 2x8.
Right, by using individual pieces of veneer, you eliminate a lot of the strength-reducing characteristics of wood, such as knots and slope of grain that you would have in a 2x member.
It really is engineered.
Right.
What other products are we using in the construction of the house that are?
We're going to be using an oriented strand board exterior wall sheathing to create our shear wall. This is a product that's made with the same real adhesive that is used in a laminated veneer lumber beam or plywood.
And what kind of adhesive is it? It's not something that people need to worry about in terms of allergies, is it?
The emissions of formaldehyde from this product is almost immeasurable in a laboratory setting. It's very low.
It's practically non-existent.
Right.
But yet, I know that a lot of builders even are concerned that OSB, oriented strand board, or sometimes they call it by the misnomer chipboard, that it can delaminate, especially if you've got flooding situations, a lot of water.
Right. This product is manufactured with the full intention that it should be exposed to the weather. That includes rain for a temporary period of time. Under normal construction delays, this product will not lose strength after it's exposed to rainfall.
But what about if it's immersed in water in a flooding situation?
That shouldn't be a problem either. That's part of the testing at APA, is to fully impregnate this product with water using a vacuum. It's injected more or less into the interior of the panel, and then we test the panel to make sure that it hasn't lost strength.
Yeah, great. Well, let's see how they're coming along with the wall here. Okay, now we're sliding in what you call the jack stud. This is where you're going to have a window opening. And so you have two of the jack studs on either side of these studs. And then down at the bottom, you'll have what they call the cripples, which are these short cutoffs that go on either side and on 16-inch centers. And then at the top, I'll bring in the other one of these extra heavy headers. Which also get nailed together. Once the wall's ready to go up, there are 2 or 3 things that need to be done. First, on the outer perimeter, some braces so that when we raise the wall, it doesn't fall over the side. Secondly, on the sides of the walls, some 2x4s that will help raise it and help keep it in place temporarily. Okay, all right, now we're ready to bring it up. 1, 2, 3. Okay, Russell, are you going to do the plumbing? Yep. There we go. Let me get the sledge. There. Is that good? That's good. Beauteous. Yeah. Once it's up and made plumb, we add these additional temporary braces.
Next, we'll see an experimental house retrofitted to prevent damage from hurricanes.
We're in front of 113 Calhoun Street here in Charleston, a house that's 125 years old and which was heavily damaged a decade ago when Hurricane Hugo swept over Charleston. Now, in the last 5 years, the house has been reconstructed and reconfigured and really rebuilt as a demonstration house to let people and builders understand better ways of mitigating the effects of flood and high winds and even earthquakes in this part of the country. Beth Judge is an associate at Clemson University who's an expert in all these different areas, and she's going to help us understand some of the features of the house. Hi, Beth, how are you?
Hi, Bob.
Tell me a little bit about the collaboration here. There's a number of different groups involved in creating this, right?
That's right, Bob. We've got the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, Clemson University, the City of Charleston, who donated the house, Charleston County, the Emergency Management Agency here in South Carolina, and we've also had substantial funding from FEMA.
Great. So it's a long-term educational tool that you've created here. What are some of the objectives?
Well, Bob, we're hoping that not only can we promote these hazard-resistant building techniques to builders and architects, engineers, homeowners, but we're also using the house as a lab. We're bringing in some technologies that aren't quite tested, and we're going to see how they perform here in downtown Charleston.
And the concept of sustainability, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, Bob, sustainability really means that we of this generation meet our needs while ensuring that those in future generations can meet their needs as well.
So that means using certain materials judiciously and bringing in new materials. Now, looking at the house, it looks like something out of the mid-19th century with those beautiful double porches and the columns. What kind of changes have been made here?
Well, Bob, down here what we've done is we actually elevated the house during the construction progress, and we rebuilt the foundation. Here we've got a seismic zone, so we've got a poured concrete footing, concrete block, reinforced. It's all bolted together to the house sill.
So the brick veneer is just hiding a concrete pier that supports the house.
That's exactly right, and that's why you see this sort of interesting feature right here.
What about the level of the house?
Well, you know, it's about a foot higher than it was originally. One of the master's degree students at Clemson, one of those engineers, she did a lot of research, and she found that by just elevating it a mere 7 inches, we could eliminate 60% of the flooding events here in downtown Charleston.
And that, of course, is the source of a lot of damage and a lot of billions of dollars, right?
Absolutely. There's no question about that.
And what about some of the materials that we're looking at here? Is it all wood?
Well, most of it is wood because our Board of Architectural Review likes to stick to the original materials.
In the historic district,
In the historic district. So most of it's a cypress siding. We've also got a hardy plank back here on the back part of the house, and that's a cementitious material that we're using on the back part. We've also got here, these are sort of a fiberglass. They're made to look like wood. This is actually really wood.
Right.
And in here, we're, of course, tying everything together. You can see this right here.
So that in many areas of the house, you've left items exposed that show us how everything gets tied together.
That's exactly right, Bob.
Can we look inside?
Sure. Bob, here in the house we've used a blown cellulose insulation. That's basically a recycled newspaper. But down here, we've got a flood zone, and so what we're using is a rigid foam insulation that can be reused.
That's a very good tip, so that you don't have to totally re-insulate the entire house if you should have some partial flooding.
That's exactly right.
What about structural things that you can do to make the house stronger?
Over here, Bob, we've got a lot of different things being used. We've used some metal strapping to reinforce some of the old wood, and occasionally we have had to sister the older floor joists with some newer ones. We've also used an epoxy that will strengthen the old wood where there were rotting problems.
So that you can preserve some of the antique elements of the house and still make them structurally viable.
That's right.
And the windows, they get strapped in?
The windows are also strapped in all the way to the building's frame.
Now, Beth, this is all fine and good in new construction, but what do you do if you're retrofitting?
Well, you know, Bob, there are some retrofit products, and this particular one we're demonstrating here was invented up at Clemson by a graduate student and his professor. They're calling it the high wind retrofit bracket.
How's it work?
Well, what you do is actually you cover it over your sheetrock, and you actually lag screw it into the upper story floor joist and your wall studs here.
And then you can just take some crown molding and dress it up.
That's exactly right.
So that's a good way of doing it. Well, thanks, Beth. This is all very edifying.
Oh, thank you.
More is available on constructing and retrofitting homes to withstand hurricanes at bobvila.com.
All right, then the next step is putting up the sheathing, and one tip is to get a chalk line and put up a guide for your first course and put up these nails into the studs up there so that you don't go off the line. And that is one quick way to make sure that they're all going in place uniformly across. You get one course down and then you go up to the next one. Brian Redling is with us. And Brian, let's talk a little bit about the function of the sheathing. I mean, up till 10 years ago, I guess we always put plywood sheathing. Now it's oriented strand board. But the whole sheathing really performs a structural function that's very important.
That's right, Bob. What we have before we install a sheathing is a set of independent studs which are able to rack with the wind load as the hurricane comes ashore. By attaching a structural wood panel sheathing like we have here, the OSB, we make the wall more of a single unit or a building block. This wall can no longer deform. It stays rectangular, and that helps to carry those wind loads into the foundation.
I like to call it the skin of the house. And what I understand also is that this is in effect a shear wall, and that the amount of nailing around the perimeter has a role in its strength.
Right. The minimum fastening schedule that we recommend is 6 inches on center around the perimeter, and 12 inches on center along the intermediate studs. But by doubling the number of fasteners around the perimeter, you roughly double the capacity of the shear wall.
So that in a hurricane-prone area, it does make sense to have the nailing close together.
Right.
3 inches?
Up to 3 inches on center with 2 buys. You could go up to 2 inches on center with a 3-inch piece of lumber.
Okay. It's important that the nails go into the sill plate. And now looking in this direction, we've already got one course down, and we've got the nails in place all along up here, so that when we put the next course up, they rest on the nail, and the nail creates the spacer, which is required in between each course of plywood for expansion and contraction. Okay, so Brian, this will go up. It's a gable end, and when we're putting the roof together, I want you to come back, okay? Thanks a lot. And then we're just about out of time. Come home again next time. We'll be finishing putting up the partitions, the outside walls, as well as building the roof. Till then, I'm Bob Vila. It's good to have you home again. For lots of information and resources for your home improvement project, check out my website at bobvila.com.